Hey everybody, welcome back to a new video. Now here on the table I have three of Bluetti's larger power stations, and we're going to be putting them head to head to see the actual real world performance and comparing the actual specifications. Now over here we have the older AC200p, and then we have the upgraded EB200p, and then we have the boss, the AC200Max, which has all the features. Now each of these comes in at a different price point based on their actual features. So in this video, we're going to be comparing the specifications for each one of these, like the inverter size, the USB options, things like that. And then we'll be breaking it down into multiple tests where we compare each one of these head to head to see how they perform. Actual capacity test results to see if there's any noise on the AC inverter, to see how loud the fans are, real world testing so you guys can see which one works best for you. I have a ton of time into the actual testing of these power stations. Let's jump right into it. Now starting with the oldest model, this is the AC200p. This does have lithium iron phosphate and it is rated at a full 3,500 charge cycles to 80% of the original capacity. Now this has a advertised capacity of 2,000 watt hours. The AC inverter is a 2,000 watt pure sine wave inverter. It puts out 120 volts. And there are 6 dust covers. Now for the USB outputs, you have 4 slow charge USB-A ports. Nothing fancy about this, a little bit outdated on the USB ports here. You also have 1 USB-C power delivery port that puts out 60 watts. Now for the DC output, Bluetti is very unique here. You have a 12 volt cigarette plug rated at 10 amps, and then this one has 2 5521 ports rated at 3 amps. And what's really unique is the 25 amp output. That means you can pull 25 amps from this power station. So very unique there. Most other power stations do not have that. Now all the DC output is regulated at 13.5 volts. Now moving to the top of the power station, you have 2 wireless charging pads, so it's nice to have those. And you have to turn the DC output on to enable those. Now as for charging for this power station, it supports a full 700 watts of solar. Now that's something that I like about the larger Bluetti power stations. They always have a lot of solar input. Now what's unique about this one is it has a input voltage of 35 volts all the way up to 150 volts. So you cannot really use 12 volt solar panels by themselves on this. You have to have 2 of them connected together in series. That's kind of one of the downsides of this. So just be aware you want to have 2 100 watt solar panels or 2 200 watt solar panels at least together in series to charge on this one. Now each of these has 2 charging inputs, so they do support dual charging. If you charge from the AC wall brick, they do have external chargers. This one's going to charge around 460 watts with the wall charger. So if you dual charge, you can get over 1,000 watts easily with solar coming in and the wall charging. Now if you want to charge faster from AC power, you can purchase a second wall charger and this little adapter. It's a 7909 to XT90 connection, and you can plug in 2 wall chargers at the same time and charge from 850 to 900 watts to get these full much faster. I will let you know down in the video description there is a spreadsheet with all the testing results and specifications side by side, so you can easily see the differences on all 3 of these models. So make sure you check out that spreadsheet after the video is finished. Just FYI, this does not have smart app connectivity, does not have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. This does not support UPS mode. Let's go ahead and talk about the EB200p. This is basically a direct upgrade of the AC200p. You'll see it's very similar. Now what's interesting about this one is branded Bluetti, but it's available on Maxoak's website, which is the parent company for Bluetti. So you cannot find this on Bluetti's website. You'll have to go to maxoak.com. I will include that down in the video description. Now this one has a rated capacity of 2,048 watt hours, so slightly more than that one. And this is lithium iron phosphate. It's rated for a full 3,500 charge cycles to 80% of the original capacity, so good there. Now for the AC inverter, it's also upgraded. This has a 2,200 watt pure sine wave inverter rated at 120 volts. Now I will be showing you guys the performance of all these inverters a little bit later in the video. This is just the specifications. Now there are 6 outlets along the bottom that have dust covers, so it's nice to have that extra protection. Now for USB outputs, you have 4 USB-A ports. Now luckily 2 of them are fast charge ports. So you have 2 slow charge, 2 fast charge, and then you have a 100 watt USB-C power delivery output port, so that is upgraded as well. Now for the actual DC output, you do have some upgrades here too. You have your standard 12 volt cigarette plug for 10 amps. You have your actual 5521 connection, so very similar there. but you do have a 30 amp output. So instead of 25, you can get the 30 amps out of this power station, and all the DC output is regulated at 13.5 volts, so very similar to the AC200P there. Now this power station also has the wireless charging pads on top, so it's nice to have that. Now one of the biggest differences is the actual charging input for this power station. So instead of 700 watts like the AC200P, this one accepts 900 watts of solar charging input, and that is because they've increased the charging rate from 12 amps up to 15 amps. So this accepts solar panels from 12 volts all the way up to 150 volts up to 15 amps. Now this has gotten rid of that weird series issue, so they don't have the weird 35 volt cutoff. You basically plug any solar panel into this as long as it doesn't go over 150 volts, and you can charge up with those solar panels in series up to 900 watts. So very cool to get the extra 200 watts of solar. This also has the AC charging port that accepts around 460 watts, so you can dual charge this as well to get over 1,000 watts charging input. So a very good charging input on this power station. They did make some improvements to make it a little easier to use with solar panels. Now for the actual displays, the display on both of these power stations is identical. The only difference is that this one has a timeout feature where you can set it to turn off the display so that you can save on that little bit of extra power. That's the one thing I do not like about the AC200P is the display is always on. This one you can actually turn off the display, so pretty cool that you could save a little bit of extra power there. Overall, these are very similar with their weights, the actual capacities, so pretty interesting. This one is just a slight upgrade over the AC200P. It does not take expansion batteries, does not have UPS mode, does not have Wi-Fi or smart app connectivity, very similar to this one here. So let's go ahead and talk about the AC200Max. Now this power station definitely offers the most upgrades and features over these other two models, so let's go ahead and break that down. Now as for the capacity of the battery inside, it's rated at 2,048 watt hours of capacity. This is a lithium iron phosphate power station, and it's rated at 3,500 charge cycles to 80% of the original capacity, just like these other two. Now what's really cool about this that stand out is this does accept expansion batteries. There are 2 expansion ports on the side of the power station that allow you to connect up 2 expansion batteries to give you up to 8,000 watt hours. So a huge advantage here. Now you can connect up 2 of the same batteries. You cannot mismatch them. So you either have to connect up 1 or 2 B230 batteries or 1 or 2 B300 batteries. Just keep in mind this is not compatible with the new B300S batteries, as those use a different style connector that's larger for the AC500. Now I want to take a second to talk about the expansion batteries for the AC200Max. This is the B230, and you use this large extension cable to connect it up to the power station. Now this is really cool because you can actually use this as a standalone battery. For example, you can charge it with the AC wall charger or the Bluetti charging enhancer, and it has its own outputs. You can actually use the 12 volt cigarette plug. It supports 10 amps, and you have 2 USB-A ports, including 100 watt USB-C power delivery port. Now, as for the actual inverter on this power station, it's rated at 2,200 watts. It does put out a pure sine wave rated at 120 volts. Now you do have a unique connector on the front. It's an RV style connector, and make it a little bit easier to connect it up to your RV or to a transfer switch, which is always nice. And you have 4 additional outlets to plug in appliances. Now for the USB output options, they're very similar to the EB200p. You have 2 USB-A ports that are slow charge, 2 USB-A ports that are quick charge, and a 100 watt USB-C power delivery port that outputs power. Now for the DC output options, you have a 12 volt cigarette plug and 2 5521 barrel connections rated at 10 amps. And then you have your 30 amp output, so very unique to the Bluetti power stations. These are all regulated at 13.5 volts. Now on the top of the power station, you have the 2 wireless charging pads, just like the other models. And for charging input, this also accepts 900 watts of solar panels. So this is very similar with the charge controller as the EB200p. Now the AC200Max does come with a slightly different power supply. Now this is a silent power supply, which is great. Now it does charge a little bit slower. It only charges at 400 watts. So you do sacrifice a slower charge rate for silent charging. Now the other benefit to this power station is it has Bluetooth connectivity. So you can use the Bluetti Smart app to either upgrade the firmware. You can turn on and off the outputs. You can see what's coming in or coming out of the power station, all from the Bluetti Smart app. So the huge benefit to this is you can upgrade the firmware. That allows you to be able to get more efficiency output. And as you'll see later in the video, you'll see that this one performs really well in our efficiency testing, probably because of those firmware updates. Now, in the next section of the video, I want to break down the actual performance, so we're going to go through a bunch of different tests to see how each one performed. Now, I have worked with both of these companies to get you guys the best price possible. So if you guys check out the video description, you'll see some discount codes down there, up to $100 in savings. So don't forget to check that out after the video is finished. Now, one of the first tests that I ran on each one of the power stations was to test to see what quality of power we got from the AC inverter. Now, each one of these are rated to have a pure sine wave output and to put out 120 volts of power. So what I did is I hooked up a 1500 watt load to each one, let the test run for 10 minutes or so to kind of sink in and let the power station warm up, and then I connected up my oscilloscope to see the actual voltage and the wavelength. So let's go ahead and start with the AC200p. Now, when I plugged in my oscilloscope, I was getting 119 volts output, and it was a pure sine wave sitting at 60 hertz, so really good on that one. Now, the EB200p, I was getting 120 volts output, and you can see the sine wave was very similar, very clean, sitting at 60 hertz. And then with the AC200Max, I was getting 118 volts, and the sine wave was very good as well, sitting right at 60 hertz. So all three of these put out really good power via their AC inverters. But what about how loud they get when they're running at max load? A lot of times the power station fans will get really loud, and I want to see how loud each one of these were. So after about 10 minutes of that load running, I pulled out my decibel meter and was sitting about a meter away, and this is what each of them sounded like. So you can see each one was putting out right around 54 decibels, and I think they're all using the same style of fan because they all sounded very similar. Now, I've definitely tested fans that are louder than these. These are kind of middle of the line. They get pretty loud, but they're not excessive. You can definitely kind of talk over it. It's not a problem. Now, what about the AC inverter putting out any interference or RF noise? One way that you can test that is by having the AC inverter enabled and then plugging in a guitar amp and seeing what it sounds like. So this is what it sounded like for each power station. Now, I threw in that other power station at the very end so you could see that there was in fact noise on that one, and these three were very clean. So no issues with interference or noise. I've always had a really good experience with Bluetti inverters on their larger power stations. Now, in the next set of tests that I did on each of the power stations, I wanted to see what the actual real-world capacity was, because each of these have their rated capacities, but there's efficiency losses as you discharge them all the way down. So let's go ahead and see what we got on each power station as we did a complete discharge test. So starting with the AC200p, this is rated at 2000 watt hours of capacity, and I started at 100% and discharged this all the way down until it shut off, and I was able to get 1750 watt hours of capacity. Moving on to the EB200p, this one's rated at 2048 watt hours of capacity, and I discharged this one all the way down until it shut off, and I was able to get 1780 watt hours, so just a little bit more than what we got on the AC200p. Now, the AC200Max, this one's rated at 2048 watt hours, and as I discharged this one all the way down until it shut off, I was able to pull a total of 1840 watt hours. So very impressive. I was able to get quite a bit more power out of the AC200Max versus these other two power stations. Now, you have to remember that the AC200Max is also expandable, and I do have one expansion battery for this, the EB230. So how much did we actually get as we discharge it all the way down with an expansion battery? Now, the total capacity of the power station with an expansion battery is 4096 watt hours. And as I discharged it all the way down with the expansion battery, I was able to get 3610 watt hours. So very good results. That's right around 89 to 88% of the advertised capacity using the expansion battery. So that means as you add expansion batteries, you don't lose any less efficiency than with the actual power station itself. So there's definitely an advantage to having the AC200Max. It uses less power over time, and it also has expansion batteries versus these other two models. Now, what about the actual amount of idle power usage does the AC inverter use as it sits there enabled? Because the AC inverter will kind of use background power. It's important to know, does this burn through 4% per hour or 1% per hour? So what I like to do is I charge each power station up to 100%, and then I turn on the AC inverter and I let it sit for 10 hours, and then I come back to see what the actual power station is sitting at. Now on the AC200P, I came back after 10 hours, it was sitting at 77%, so we lost about 23% over that 10-hour period. So the AC inverter uses around 2.3% per hour. Now on the EB200p, this one after 10 hours was sitting at 80%, meaning this one uses right around 2% per hour whenever the AC inverter is left on. Now the AC200Max, I was very impressed with this one. I left this one for 10 hours as well, and when I came back, this one was sitting at 94%, meaning it only used 6% or about 0.6% per hour. So this one definitely has an improvement of parasitic drain or idle power usage on the AC inverter versus both of these models. Now let's go ahead and change gears from the AC inverter testing over to the DC output. Now remember, each of these power stations have a large DC output. This one has 25 amps, these two have 30 amps, and that is way above the competition. Most competition like EcoFlow, Goal Zero, Jackery, they all can put out 10 amps of DC output, and you can get much more out of these. So very cool if you wanted to have these like kind of in a van. You could power your lights and a 12-volt compressor fridge and a bunch of other things like fans and stuff all off the DC output at the same time. Now the two tests that I wanted to do was a full discharge test to see what the actual capacity was on each one, and then I wanted to test the actual DC idle usage. You know, if you leave these on for 10 hours, how much power does the DC output use over that given amount of times? Now for the DC capacity test, I did have two battery load testers connected up to each one, pulling a total of 20 amps or right around 250 watts. So pretty good to be able to discharge these this fast. Now for the AC200P, I was able to get 1710 watt hours of capacity. So not that bad. You gotta remember that we're going from a 48-volt battery down to a 12-volt output. So we're gonna have some conversion losses there. So 1710 watt hours. The EB200P, we discharged this one all the way down. I was able to get 1615 watt hours of capacity. So around 100 watt hours less. So pretty interesting there. The AC200Max, discharging this one all the way down, I was able to get 1703 watt hours. So these two were both at 1700, and this one was right at 1600. So that's what you'd expect as you discharge these all the way down. Now moving on to the DC idle power usage, how much power do these use over a 10-hour period as you leave them enabled? So I had them all charged up to 100%, turned on the DC output, and came back 10 hours later. The AC200P was sitting at 96%, meaning we only lost 4% over that 10-hour period. So this one uses around 0.4% per hour, really good on that. The EB200P came back after 10 hours. It was sitting at 88%, meaning we pulled 12% over that 10-hour period. So this one uses around 1.2% per hour if you have the DC output enabled. Now for the AC200Max, this one was very interesting. After 10 hours, this one was still sitting at 100%. So super efficient DC output on the AC200Max. Now I want to go ahead and compare the form factor for each of the power stations so you can see the differences there. Now the AC200P and the AC200Max are basically the same exact footprint. As for the weight, this one comes in at 59.5 pounds. This one comes in at 60.5 pounds. So there's only 1 pound difference there. Now the EB200P is a little bit different. It's kind of rounded like the EB series. Think of the EB55, EB70, EB3A. And it's a little bit wider. This one comes in at 61.5 pounds. Now, as for the actual build quality, they're all encased in this durable ABS plastic, and on the inside they have a metal frame that holds all the components and the batteries. I've never really had an issue with durability or one of these breaking down. Now, I have had the AC200P for a while. I've taken on a few trips, and it's been a good power station. I expect the same reliability out of these two other models. Now, what about the actual warranty on each one of these? Well, the AC200P and AC200Max recently had a warranty upgrade. You have a 4-year warranty available. You get a 2-year factory warranty, and then you have the option to extend it if you register your product. So 4-year warranties on these two products. And on this one, I found on their website, it had a 2-year warranty. So maybe in the future, Max Oak will support this one with a 4-year warranty. Now, I'd love to see this Bluetti product available on Bluetti Power's website. I'm not sure why they're divided, as this one's on Max Oak's and these are on Bluetti's, even though they're all branded a Bluetti product. Now, what about the customer experience for Bluetti? You spend a lot of money to invest in a power system like this. I think the customer support experience is one of the most important features, because if something breaks, can you actually get a hold of somebody to repair or replace the product? Now, Bluetti does have a support center in Nevada. I'll include all that information on the screen here. Now, I recently had an experience with my EB3A breaking where the DC output is no longer working. So in the Smart app, they have a new function where you can actually reach out and create a service ticket to get your device RMA'd or fixed. So I went through that process. I got an email confirmation basically saying, hey, we're looking into this. We'll let you know in a couple days. Well, it's been 2 weeks and I have not heard back. So I'm not sure if that new support system through their app is working or not, but I have not had a good experience with that. I also called their phone number that's listed on their website and it just rang and rang and rang. I was not able to actually talk to someone. So maybe they were just really, really busy, but that has been my experience so far with my EB3A. Now, I do know that Bluetti recently crowdfunded their AC500 for $11 million. So I'm hoping that they put some of that money into their support system because it's super important. If people go and invest a lot of money into a power system, they need to have a good support system where they can reach out to someone and get a hold of them. And that has not been the case for my EB3A. Now, I've heard mixed feelings about Bluetti support. I've heard great things about it on my comments, and I've heard negative things about it on my comments. So I'd love to get your guys' feedback. If any of you have had an experience with Bluetti support, throw a comment down below and let me know. Now, I have not reached out to their email support yet. That's my next step. So hopefully I can get my EB3A fixed through their email support system. Of course, I have marketing contacts, but I think that's cheating the system if I just reach out to them and say, hey, my EB3A broke. Can you just send out a new one? I want to experience the real support system and see if I can get my product fixed just like you guys. So I'll keep you guys updated on my EB3A and if I can get that replaced. Now, in this part of the video, I want to talk about the actual pricing for each of the power stations. Now, I will tell you they have their MSRP prices, but most of the time you won't pay that full price. And they do go on sale. It's usually near the largest holidays when you're going to find the best pricing on these. But the prices do fluctuate daily, so just be aware if you find a good price, you're going to want to go with that current price because it could change the next day. So on the AC200p, the MSRP for this is $16.99. The MSRP for the EB200p is $19.99. And the MSRP for the AC200Max is $18.99. Now, like I said, they do come on sale. Now, the best price I've seen on the AC200p is going to be the $12.99 mark. Now, I've only seen that price once and it was very short. The average sale price for this one is going to be right around $13.99. Now, for the EB200p, the best price I've seen for this one is actually on some external websites. On Walmart.com, I've seen this for sale a little bit above $1,300, which is a really good price. But on their website, I've seen this priced at $14.99. So just a little bit more expensive than the AC200p, but you do get the upgraded 900 watt solar charge controller. You don't have that 35 volt cutoff for your solar panels, and the display does turn off to save on power. So you do get a little bit more efficiency out of this model than you do with the AC200p. Now, for the AC200Max, this one usually is priced around $17.99. Now, I haven't really seen it drop below that price very much. Maybe once or twice I've seen it for $17.50, but because this one has the higher feature set, like the expandable batteries, the Bluetooth connectivity with the Smart app, this one's going to be more expensive. Now, the price per watt hour is going to vary on those sale prices, but this one I've seen as low as 64 cents a watt hour. On this one, I've seen this as low as 68 cents a watt hour, and this one is an average of around 87 cents a watt hour. So you can look at those prices and make a decision on what works best for your use case and for your budget. Okay, so we're basically coming to the end of the video here, and I want to wrap a few things up. First off, what did you guys think of this head-to-head comparison or / review video of all three of these larger Bluetti power stations? Now, I know it was a ton of information to kind of go over and to analyze. Now, to make it a little bit easier, I've included all the raw data for all my testing on these power stations and also other power stations I've tested in my power station grading sheet. So if you check out the power station grading sheets on my website, I'll have a link down to it in the video description. But basically, you click on that and click on the second tab, it'll show you all the raw data. So if you're into analyzing data, you're gonna love that second tab. Now, the first tab is more simplified. Basically talks about how these actually were scored. Now there's 10 points available, and based on their price, performance, and functionality is how they get their actual score. In fact, these all scored 8.5 points, but for different reasons. And I've kind of adjusted the grading system based on feedback from my viewers and direct emails. Now, I have changed it up a little bit. Now these two right here, they got 8.5 points because they lost 1 point because they do not support UPS functionality, and they lost a half point because they do not have smart app connectivity. Now this one right here got 8.5 points, but for a different reason. This one does not have UPS functionality, so it lost a point there. And this one is priced above 80 cents a watt hour, so we gave it a half point off there. So 8.5 points all the way around, but for different reasons. So if you want to see how these stacked up against the competition, check out the Power Station grading sheet. I know you guys are gonna like all that data. Now guys, I really appreciate you guys watching to the end of the video. Please give me a thumbs up, smash that thumbs up button if you liked the video, and hopefully we'll see you guys in a future video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later.